Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Property and Investor Podcast. This is the podcast where we speak to some of the most interesting, inspiring, and resilient people in property investing and beyond. I, of course, am your host, Paul Lanfear. Now, I always say this, but my inner lawyer requires me to tell you that nothing in the podcast will be anything like financial, legal, or health advice. Obviously, seek your own professional advice. I know you will. Now, if you're familiar with the podcast, which I think you probably will be, you will realize that this is a very special mini series of the podcast. It's a mini series within the Property Investor Podcast, which is separate from the long form ones. And in fact, my guest has appeared as a long form one, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But this mini series is all about the Inner Circle All-Stars. So these are people who I had the absolute privilege of working with as part of my Inner Circle mentoring group, and very often I've met them through the Property Breakfast. So today's guest is no other than Sarah Flynn. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Paul. It is an absolute honour to be here, as ever, when I get invited to anything by you, of course.
Well, that's very kind of you. Now, look, we did a long form podcast. In fact, I think it was one of the first podcasts that we ever did. So I would recommend everybody to pause the podcast, go back to the first podcast and hear about Sarah and her journey and all the things that, she has done, and then return to this podcast. But as to this podcast, so this is kind of a short form podcast where we just discuss really the Inner Circle mentoring program, of which Sarah has been a part for a couple of years. So on with that. So Sarah, tell these good people like where you were when you first joined the Inner Circle mentoring program.
So I have obviously been a part of Paul's Inner Circle program now for 2 years. This is coming up to the end of my second year. And that when I first joined, one of the main, I suppose, overriding drivers for me joining was that I really wanted to kind of accelerate my success and growth within my property business. Mm-hmm. But I also really wanted to understand the mechanics of how to do that, because I think that there's lots of programs out there, expensive programs, many of which I have definitely been a part of myself, that promise you the earth. And it's not that those things aren't true. It's just there are a lot of untold truths on that really hard road to success that nobody mentions. And after meeting Paul, it became really apparent that he had definitely walked through the hard nails of that path, and that probably he would tell me some of those untold truths, warts and all. And that was really what I was looking for at the start, the real deal, as it were, so what is going to get me from A to B in the quickest possible time, but with a really honest view of the world, and how do I navigate through that journey, in essence.
And you weren't like a complete novice, were you? I mean, by this point, when we had met, you had already done like a series of transactions. Like, you were a kind of fully fledged property investor and entrepreneur by this stage.
Yes, but I think, as you know very well, Paul, I have very enormous dreams. So I'm a huge believer that you should stand on the shoulders, as you would very well say, of other giants to help you get there. And that was very much how I saw the Inner Circle at that point, for me to get to that next level, get over that sort of first hurdle of having a few properties to building an entire empire. I needed those gaps to be bridged, in essence, I suppose. And that's where you and the Inner Circle came in.
And then when you first came on the program, what were the problems and challenges that you were experiencing?
So I think from my point of view, some of the biggest issues that I was facing at the time was understanding the mechanics behind rapid growth and also the truth of rapid growth. And I suppose, just to dig a bit deeper at what I specifically mean by that, I was trying to buy 7-8 houses in a year. That was sort of what I had in my mind, and because a lot of the time that's what I'd been sold to as well. And I think that in reality that was never going to happen. So some of those sort of theories were washed away, which was helpful because it was stopping me feeling like a bit of a failure internally, I suppose. But also kind of how to buy houses quickly. You know, I was trying to use mortgages and all that sort of stuff. And then it became apparent that really buying cash, you know, was a quicker method. And kind of just the intricacies of how to make that model work and make it work successfully, but also a lot of the realities that sat behind it, you know, like as I now know, sitting on the other side of the fence, that whenever you're in a period of growth, it just completely eats up any capital and profit that you have. And I just not understood that. So a lot of the time I'd be taking what I felt was the profit from the business, you know, and then wondering why we were hemorrhaging money, or we had no money, you know, or we had very little money in the account. And I'm thinking, but this is what the you know, the properties are making, and I'm taking this money, but not really understood that wider piece at the time around, you know, but you've got loads of solicitors fees coming out, Sarah, on top of your normal stuff, because you're trying to buy more properties, and you've got valuations and you know, so just like I said, those kind of untold truths in a way is where I found myself most sort of developing through the program, and where I sort of took the most knowledge, I suppose.
Definitely. So you were experiencing growth pains, the growth pains that like literally all of us kind of experience, but they come as a shock when you have them, and you know, we don't necessarily anticipate all of them. And there's definitely a benefit, and like, you know, I said, as you alluded to, like we all stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, if you kind of can see what's coming down the path, that is inevitably a little bit more helpful than just kind of taking it as it comes. So in terms of the program itself then, so how did it help? What kind of insights did you have? Where are you now? Like where have you progressed to?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting question, because what I've taken out of it from this year was very different to what I took out of it last year. So I think that when I started on this journey last year, it very much was about, okay, how can I grow rapidly? How can I, you know, make a lot of money in the shortest time possible, you know, but the most efficient way, and the legal way, and the right way, and how do I be compliant with all the investors? So I think last year was very much about the actual practicalities of building like a very large scale business. And that was what I would say for me last year in the program was like a foundation year. So I was really understanding the foundations of a fully fledged large scale business, how they operate, how they function, how do you automate that, you know, how do you successfully and compliantly go and find external investment from private finance, and all the mechanics that sit behind that, and the realities was really fundamentally what I learned last year. And they were just such key things that a lot of people don't talk about, or in many cases actually just don't understand. And that's where they end up failing and falling down in their own businesses, and why things then don't maybe work out as they anticipate. So I think that the first year was phenomenal, because from a practical level, all the sessions that we did really, really set the scene beautifully for me to mechanically understand how I was going to take this beast forward, you know, and make it into exactly what I wanted it to be, without falling into the potential pitfalls that other people do. However, this year has been so different going through it the second time. It was really interesting because another member of the inner circle and I, who's also been in it for a second year, were talking about this only a few weeks ago, because at the start of the program we both said, you know, I wonder what this year is going to bring, and how's it going to be different, you know, going through similar things, what we're going to learn. And that was really interesting to see how that's unfolded, because actually when you go through it a second time, I've taken something widely different from it now, a much deeper meaning. And I've found that what it's made me do this year is really look at my own values and who I am as a person, and what I really want from the business, and what I want from life, and what I want, you know, what am I using the business for? So what is it? Is it a vehicle for me to achieve fulfillment in X? You know, what is that reason that I'm doing this business? And you know, as anybody that knows me, and I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this probably will know me, obviously my brother passed away, and that was the reason we started the business. And, you know, whilst that is the core value behind the business, I don't think I'd ever really connected with what I personally wanted out of it. And where it was heading for me, you know, what is the outcome, and what do I want from it? And, you know, that's great that I've got this business and I'm building it for my brother, but how is that going to serve me, and how does it fulfill me long term? And it's really forced me to sort of look into myself, I think, because I learned all the kind of core stuff in the first year, and then it enabled me to take like this additional layer out of the program this year, which I never expected. And I've come out the other side genuinely like quite a different person. I think like the level of understanding that I have now about myself and the business and what I want from it. And, now I truly realize that I am probably a lifestyle entrepreneur, and I always saw myself as an empire builder for a long time. And I think that the element of that is still in me, but that is not like at my core who I actually am. And it's just really helped me connect with the business and what's important in the business and what I like about the business and what I don't like about the business. And I never even considered that before. I was just like, oh, this is the business and I have to do it. And now I've sort of kind of understood, okay, so I don't like these bits of the business and that doesn't really fit my personality type. So maybe I should, delegate that to somebody else. Or maybe we just don't do that part of the business because I don't enjoy it. And that sort of broad self-awareness, I suppose, has really just come out this year. And so, like I said, just taking something completely different from it this year. There's so many wins for me, like I could talk about it forever.
That is absolutely fascinating, because that's obviously the first time I've heard this, and that is absolutely fascinating, and obviously is a delight and pleasure to hear. And what came up for me when you were saying that is that it does resonate with that model of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That we start off kind of attending to our basic needs of survival, and then we transcend, and then ultimately, in Maslow's words, we self-actualize. You're definitely just those. That's effectively what you have just described, the kind of transition that you've been on, and it's obviously the program itself is what myself and obviously my life partner Liz do like every year. So we're like in it kind of with you, like this is what we do every year. And I definitely think it's lovely to hear that you're moving closer to kind of your authentic self, which I think is what you've just described, and that's certainly the part of the mission. So I'm obviously thrilled to hear all of this. Okay then, so with that in mind then, what does the future look like?
That is an excellent question. So because of this deep period of self-reflection and self-awareness that I've been going through, there is a vast amount of change in our business at the minute, far beyond anything I ever would have imagined at the beginning of this year. And I feel that there's some parts of the business that we are possibly putting to bed for a while. I think a large part of the rental business will be put to bed for a while. We are in the midst now of selling some properties that are just not working quite as well as they did, sort of post the enormous amount of change that's going on in the world now. We could spend some time doing some refinances and rejigging it, and we could sort that out. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of equity in those properties. And, I strongly feel on reflection that it's time for me to do something maybe slightly different for a while, whether that's a year or 2 years or 6 months. I don't know what that looks like. But when we very first started the business, the mission was always about developments eventually. Always. So I think there's an opportunity now for us to sell some of those properties that have nicely built up a large amount of equity in a short space of time. We've been exceptionally lucky in that regard, exceptionally so. And they say you make your money when you buy, and I think that now we're realizing that that's actually never been true. I've seen that with my own eyes for the first time, and that's been really lovely to kind of see that work, that magic work, I suppose. And, so I think really we would like to next year probably do a development. I think we're going to try and sell some properties. That's the plan over the next sort of few months. We've got one that's completing hopefully by the end of next week, and then hopefully another couple, if everything works, it should maybe the end of January. So I think, really that going into next year, we would like to maybe do a small development. I don't know how that looks yet. I don't know if that's a few houses. I don't know if it's a block of flats. I'm not sure what that is. But I think I'm very definite in my mind that I think it's a right time for us to do that. I think it would be nice to use the equity out of the properties to make that money grow in it, in a different way. And then another proportion of that is going to be to expand my ever-growing holiday let business, which again came absolutely out of nowhere. And I think what's been phenomenal about that is just how well that business has suited my personality, far beyond anything I ever could have imagined.
Yep.
At the time, I was just doing it, you know, in the early part of this year as a real trial and error, because if anybody's bothered to listen to the story, I basically met somebody at a party when I was a little bit too inebriated, and they told me they had some caravans on the East Coast, and I just thought it'd be a laugh to have a go and see how that panned out for me. And, you know, the reality is it's panned out really well. And I actually, out of anything, enjoy that business the most out of all the businesses that we have. So I think that that's been really exciting. And I think it's about to get more exciting. I think from everything we've looked at, we were going to buy another 2. We now may buy another 3 new caravans in the new year, looking at all things considered. So yeah, I think such a U-turn from where we were at the beginning of the year, and everything I ever envisaged. But I couldn't be happier with the way that it's coming out now, because I think that finally the things that I'm going to do are things that will really align with my own purpose and things that I really want myself. And I think we finally struck that balance, you know, about the whole needing the cash flow versus needing large sums of cash, and you can never get that balance. It's a real balance act for such a long time in business, and I think, you know, finally we're probably going to turn that corner where the holiday let business will, you know, serve the cash flow very well, which will then just give us the breathing space to do the development, and there'll be no pressure from that side because we won't need to take any money from that business whilst we do whatever development we're going to do. So that's definitely what the future holds for us imminently. And I couldn't be more excited to go into the new year in my new self. You know, with I suppose with a business that really makes me tick now and that I can feel excited about again, which in truth at the beginning of this year I didn't feel excited about the business. I felt quite sluggish about it. I felt like it wasn't going in the direction that kind of wanted it to go, and really that's come all the way full circle now to something that hopefully is my direction of travel.
Do you know what? That's absolutely, it's so interesting hearing it, you know, because one of the things you don't hear in property circles, but you do hear in other investment circles, is this concept of no one ever went broke taking profits. So it's a like Wall Street kind of adage, and you just never ever hear it in property circles, because it's always like keep going, keep going, and often like, you know, chuck the debt on the debt on the debt on the debt. But what you're doing is fascinating. You're doing kind of what well, where I've come across this before was when I had a property management business. I'd meet these huge portfolio landlords, and I'd often ask them, like, is anything for sale? And they would smile at me and say, everything's for sale, Paul. How much would you like to pay for it? And you know, they talk about this constant process of trimming around the edges, recapitalizing your business, keeping like the best assets, keeping a super kind of healthy, lean business, which is what you're doing. But like, you're doing it kind of 20 years before they were doing it in their cycle, so you're ahead of them, so Lord knows where you end up. And you love what's absolutely is a real pleasure to see is how much you absolutely loved your service accommodation business. And I think when we first met, I don't think I'd even heard those words uttered from your mouth, and now, you know, I can see that you love it. It's highly profitable. You know, and you seem to have like a completely new lease of life for it, which is absolutely fantastic to see. Yeah, so congratulations with all of that.
Thank you.
In terms of if somebody was thinking about coming to the breakfasts, meeting me, thinking about then going on to like do a cycle in the inner circle, like what would you say to them? If someone was thinking about joining the inner circle.
I mean, many people have asked me this genuinely, because obviously people are always interested in what I do, and you know, why am I in mentoring groups and things like that. And interestingly, somebody who is in the inner circle this year rang me at the end of last year and said, I'm thinking of joining the inner circle, you know, what would you say? And my instant response was absolutely do it. It's a complete no-brainer. Like, don't waste your life, you're gonna miss a place. You know, and I think he thought I was a little bit insane at the time, but that is the reality. So I think the first kind of caveat for me is that I'm a massive fan of mentoring per se.
Me
I'm a
too.
big believer in life that, you know, you should go and find the best person who has already done the things that you want to do, and you should just copy and paste that. Like that's just generally, I think that's a good, you know, life lesson there. And I think it's really important for someone to hold your hand through those hard times, through things that nobody else talks about. And I think particularly in the property business, there are a lot of sharks, there are a lot of people trying to sell you the earth, and they don't tell you the bad bits. And I think that what is especially unique about you, Paul, and the breakfast and the inner circle, and I've genuinely, hand on my heart, never come across this before, is the honesty and the sincerity in which you present all information about your businesses, your life, you know, the things that you've gone through to get the businesses and to get where you are today. And I've never come across anybody that tells those genuine untold truths, as I said at the start. And that's something really special and unique, because in business, as anybody knows, and particularly a property business, because it's generally very solo and quite solitary, and a lot of the time you just sat there thinking that all these things you're experiencing and these challenges, and you know, when you're on your 17th mortgage that's failed, you know, that it's just you all the time. It's just me that's experiencing this, and how do I get over there? And I think what the inner circle provides, and your wisdom provides, is that real untold knowledge that, you know, this is reality and this is real, and you can get over this. And you know, you provide practical solutions to those problems, and that's what each individual session provides to me. You know, they're very clear-cut sessions, you know, so you've got one all about how do you market and promote yourself on social media, and you know, how do you genuinely go about getting investment and raising funds in a legal and compliant way, and all those questions that people just are sat at home probably thinking, I'd love to know that and I just don't know, or I'm just on my own here. And you're watching social media, it looks like everybody else is a millionaire apart from you that's got £5 in your bank account, you know. And we, you know, we've all you're laughing because we've all been there, we've all done that, and it's so stupid to sit there on your own when there's a solution to that problem. And you know, to me, the solution is the inner circle. You know, it's about being around other like-minded people that genuinely care about the business, that want to progress, but they want to progress in an honest and a legal and compliant way, and they want to feel included in something bigger, and they want to share the woes, and sometimes they do just want to vent about how bad the week has been, you know, because you've lost 4 deals and your refinance has fallen through, and that's just, you know, the longer I've been on this program, the longer that I realize that is just the reality. Like that, something like that happens every single week. But without that program, I would still be sat at home looking at my computer, feeling like I was the only person that was feeling this level of pain. And that's not true. You know, there are solutions and there are ways around things. And, you know, the inner circle absolutely provides all of those things. And, you know, personally, just you as a person, I think, are very unique. You're very individual. You're exceptionally understanding. You provide a real friendly ear in the one-to-ones, you know, that we have, and they can literally be about anything. I know I've spoke to you about a lot of personal things in my own life through that, you know, through the last couple of years. And I sort of joke that like my own private counselling sessions, but you know, in a way, they sort of are, because everybody needs that when you're in this really difficult business of property. And I think that it's just a great all-rounder package to provide just support, care, a bit of love and TLC when everybody needs it, but a lot of practical information of how do you get through those untold truths. And I think it's key. It's the most unique program I've ever been on, and I would absolutely recommend it to anybody.
Wow. And I'm thrilled to hear all of that. I mean, it's very, and it is very kind of you as well. I think, you know, I think I'm pretty straightforward in explaining, you know, like I don't, you know, some people in the world say they're like a self-made man, which is like a kind of a cliche. And I'm always at pains to say, like, I'm absolutely not that. You know, I've been very fortunate, you know, whether it was like guitar teachers when I was 14 and I wanted to be a rock star, or my first boss, or, you know, all the kind of, you know, many of the property mentors that I've had, you know, we do, as you allude to, stand on the shoulders of giants. And if I can, kind of pass some of that back, then you know, it was a life well lived, isn't it? And obviously I'm thrilled to hear that you get so much out of it. I mean, it is, it's obviously an absolute pleasure. Right. So thank you very much for all of that. And how can these good people connect with you if they want to reach out and connect with you?
So I really like wine. So if anybody wants to invite me to the pub, no, I'm joking.
Okay, so send Sarah wine.
No, I'm joking. So I'm on most social media platforms. If you just search Sarah Flynn, or sometimes Sarah Flynn Official, I think comes up, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Or you could go to one of my websites. You could go to our business website, which is www.kafproperties.co.uk, or you can go to my own website, which is www.sarahflynnofficial.co.uk. So I'm everywhere. You can contact me everywhere you want.
You're omnipresent, aren't you?
I am.
So as long as you put Sarah Flynn property in, you're likely to
turn up. I'll turn up somewhere, Paul.
Exactly.
Don't worry. Yeah.
And look, if you haven't yet checked out Sarah's long form podcast, please go and do that now, because it's really worth a listen. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Sarah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There we have it. So to discuss anything arising in this podcast, the property, resilience, much more, please join me at the next Property and Investor Breakfast. Link is in the show notes. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast, give it a 5-star review if you're enjoying it. Obviously helps it get out to more people. And obviously connect with me via social media. All my links are in the show notes. In the meantime, stay well, and thanks again for listening to the podcast.